Hi everyone, my name is Susana and I'm a PhD candidate in Museology at the University of Manchester. During the next 10 minutes, I'm going to draw my research on book exhibitions to offer a different take on the subject of access. Given that I'm still at the data collection stage of this research, I have to start with an apology because the talk is going to be more about theories and concepts that are yet to be corroborated than about tried and tested solutions. Nonetheless, I hope this presentation prompts you to reflect on your own practice and perhaps even persuade you that there is value in thinking about book exhibitions and access through the concepts that I will be introducing today. I'm certainly very interested in hearing your views as practitioners. So, the concepts that I'm going to be talking about today are the ordinary luminosity of the book, the idea of the book as visitor, and the history of the book interpretation approach. In introducing these concepts, I want to invite you to shift the focus of attention from issues of physical access to the moment when the visitor first encounters the book inside the exhibition case. Let's put aside for a minute the challenges of overcoming physical barriers and ask instead if there is anything already there that could act as a bridge between the viewer and the exhibited book, even if it is just at a visual level. There is a reason why I'm asking you to do this, which I think is important to mention. Much of the academic research on book exhibitions focuses on the managerial challenges and opportunities that organizing a show may pose for library curators and for the books in terms of preservation and conservation. There are also many publications about the gains of using exhibitions as engagement and promotional tools. Although I acknowledge the contribution of this literature, I believe that it overlooks important questions related to the agency of the book in the exhibition environment. How does the book itself contribute to the exhibition experience? What messages are communicated in this process? And what are the potentials of this knowledge for interpretation practice? To admit these possibilities is to accept that the book has a power to affect that is not necessarily tied up to the act of reading. Literary theory has evidenced that both the content and the form add to this experience. More so, that the book object itself can produce completely different ones by way of its materiality and symbology, as those familiar with Jessica Pressman's work on the concept of bookishness will know. In my research, I refer to this agency with the neo-materialist term of think power, which I define as the ability of the book to create experience both through its content and its format. In the exhibition environment, however, the primacy of the visual seems to transform this agency into an emotions-activated agency, because arguably it is what we see and what we feel as we encounter the book in the case that sets the experiential process in motion, and therefore what gives the book an agency to affect. To put it differently, that whilst the book is inside the vitrine, its affective capabilities are only as powerful as the emotions each viewer pours into it. And I think this is worth mentioning because one, it immediately broadens the number of bridges that can be built between the viewer and the book. We don't have to rely on physical contact to access, to connect with this object. And two, because I strongly believe that only by bringing the distinctive material and symbolic qualities of the book to the core of our discussions, that we will be able to develop a more fitting museology of the book exhibition. So let's begin. What is the ordinary luminosity of the book? The idea of the luminous has been used before in reference to objects and places that speak to us, for example, because of their significance in religious rituals, historical events, or popular culture. In the case of books, the luminosity can also derive from the private and more modest significances, in comparison, with which people imbue books throughout their lives. To recognize this, I draw on Catherine Stewart's concept of ordinary affect, the mysterious ways in which some objects manage to entrap and fascinate us despite their ordinariness. I then combine these two terms into the ordinary luminosity of the book, and I use this phrase to refer to the power of books to trigger emotions and elicit experiences independently or in addition to those wishes for by curators for their displays in exhibitions. Building on this idea, I posit that whenever visitors encounter a book on display, they see two books. The idea of the book in the Platonic sense, of which we all have some kind of lived experience and which conditions our first emotional response, not necessarily in a positive way, and then the material iteration, the display book, which adds to this response or not. As you can see in this diagram, part of a much bigger discussion that I cannot go into today, it is the combination of these two views which forms the basis of the experience. Since this ordinary noumen is allegedly and arguably latent in all books in the generic condition as books, I suggest that there might be a typology of visitor who might be more susceptible of connecting with or accessing the noumen of books. And then our second concept of the day, the Bookish visitor. The term Bookish is a fluid adjective that admits as many definitions and intensities as types of relationship with books and reading exist. Some may be bookish because of their prolific reading habits, others because of their profession, their academic interests, their hobbies, their active participation in literary culture, their attraction for the book as an object, or a combination of all these in different degrees. The all-encompassing definition that I employ is that a bookish person is someone with a strong and positive connections with books and reading. My hypothesis is that bookish visitors are likely to be the ones more perceptive of and receptive to the noumen of books, and therefore the ones whose visiting experiences are more attractive for my study. What is it that I am researching and how does it fit in with the subject of this conference? In my research, I interrogate the role that people's lived experience of books and reading play during a visit to a book exhibition. I want to understand to what extent the emotions attached to and resulting from this accumulation of experiences with books and reading, what I call bookish emotions, may interfere with the way in which visitors make sense of and take pleasure from the displays. I'm also interested in knowing whether bookish emotions can impact on people's motivations and expectations for the visit, how it may condition their mindset as they set foot and access the exhibition space, and on how this may correspond with the way in which books are presented by curator. It is important to note that when I talk about emotional responses, I am not concerned with defining exactly what it is felt at sensorial level. Instead, I am intrigued by what these emotional responses make us do. A conception of emotion as practice, which draws on the writings of emotion theorists Monique Shearer and Sarah Ahmed, and that allows me to add to this pot of conceptual tools the ideas of emotional practice and emotional communities. Again, in my research, I draw on these ideas to suggest that there might be an emotional community for whom book exhibition visiting might be a type of emotional practice. In this vein, the bookish visitor is someone who may visit, amongst many other reasons, to be in the presence of books, to enact bookish emotions, and to build on their identity as bookish. As I said, this is yet to be corroborated, but the potential of this premise to develop our curatorial and marketing strategies could be quite considerable. After having explained these two concepts, the question that remains is whether there are any interpretation strategies that might help the think power of the book, the noumen, to kick into action so more people have more meaningful experiences in exhibitions. Enter the history of the book interpretation approach. This is a way of communicating books in exhibitions that doesn't just tell the story in the book, but also the story of the book. It draws on disciplines like the history of the book and the history of reading, as well as on the history of the display book as a collection item, to provide the viewer with the bibliographical literacy tools to decode it, to access it as an object. In doing so, it seeks to carve out a new path for communication wherein viewers can compare what they see with what they know and with their previous experiences of books and reading. For example, not many people will know why the margins in a medieval manuscript are often so wide compared to the margins in a modern book. But if we tell them about how books were read and made in the past and what purposes those margins serve, they can then compare this with their own reading practice, and from this new viewpoint, gain a richer understanding of the object in front of them. My suggestion is that maybe we should do this as a matter of course for all exhibitions, or at the very least, consider it. To conclude, book exhibitions, like any other type of exhibitions, are visited by people who may find themselves in that space for a multitude of reasons. Many will be there to look at books and to learn about a particular subject. Others because they're looking for something to do with their children. This plurality is even more evident in library exhibitions because the library itself is a multifunctional building that we visit to read, research, study, meet friends. Entering the exhibition space could thus be down to simple happenstance. In this light, thinking about books, audiences, and experiences in the ways I have suggested today, drawing on pre-existing connections which could act as emotional and intellectual bridges between books and people, and bringing the process of meaning making to the realm of the familiar and the personal may become effective strategies to broaden the paths which give access to our exhibitions. Many thanks.